Hola guys, I'm Diego, and welcome back. As you can see, we're in my... okay, should be fine. Okay, as you can see, we are in my Agrarian Skies world. Now, I've turned a few of the settings down just because I've got quite a bit going on in the background that you guys won't likely see. But I did want to go over a few things here before we really get started. First and foremost, I have connected the majority of my stuff to the AE system. I've automated the ability to make both bread and toast. Apparently none of my bread went in there. What? Hold on. What's going on here? I'm not entirely sure, but okay then. Well, apparently it's working, and that's all that really matters. I guess maybe it's not keeping up with all the toast I made. I'm not really sure. At any rate, I've slightly modified this so I have a rubber sapling, a sacred rubber. What? No. What? Hold on. Okay, I have no idea. Anyways, like I said, I've hooked all this up with AE. It's just so that I can get some wood, oak wood, and rubber wood as well. This is all supposed to be infested, but I just really haven't needed to farm it recently. I've got plenty of string from the mob farm, which I also need to check at some point, but I'll do that off camera. At any rate, this is the 2.1.5 update. There are... oh, apparently I've got a lot of food stuff there. There are a few updates to things, specifically in the quests and such. I'm not going to go over all of those. Basically, they've revamped a few things in the order. They've changed the steel-powered section to steel-powered flight to kind of emphasize the fact that, yes, you can get a jetpack. So, that will be something I'll probably try and take a look at this episode. I believe I may have shown you guys this. I have actually moved everything, except for the top right stuff, over. I've also... why is it... okay, there we go. I'm not entirely sure, but apparently he can't come through there. At any rate, why? Okay, let's fix that. Thank you, skeleton. Go away, please. Leave me be. I'm trying to fix my wall. Okay, there we go. So, no, obviously there's not a whole lot going on in there, but there is some stuff going on out here. And my mob farm's working now, you can see that. Now, as well, I have actually given myself a basement. It's fairly large, as you can see on the minimap. The original tower of blocks I thought was fairly large. Turns out, really isn't quite big enough. Let me show you why. I'll start top floor. Yes, I have expanded this. I've added a third layer of magmatic dynamos on here. And currently I've been having a little bit of trouble with the lava just because I was kind of backlogging things a little bit. So these aren't quite full yet. Oop. And this wasn't quite full either, but it's doing a lot better now. At any rate, those will fill up eventually, I'm sure. So this is obviously fairly full. I've slightly modified some of the recipes that are in here. You can't really tell that just from in here, but I've added a few things. I just wanted to show you guys that. Let's go down to the next level. Oop. And this is kind of my main level where I do most of my work. I haven't moved the important things down to the main floor yet, but this is just where I do stuff. So we've got the ME fluid terminal, which is actually new. This just allows me to put, or rather view the liquids that I pump into the system. That's why my lava is down. So it's about 64. And I'll just be back in just a second. I'm getting really bad frame rates for some reason, and I'm not entirely sure why. Okay, I think hopefully this fixes it. Again, I apologize if it doesn't. I know my world's a bit messy, but I do what I can, and hopefully it helps. So we'll see. At any rate, I've got my AE system here. I did want to go over a few changes to the automation portions that I've got here. Specifically, the reason why I have all these machines here with the ME interfaces on them. I have this set up to make rubber bars out of raw rubber and to make raw plastic out of rubber bars. This is just so that I don't have to worry about dealing with anything else. Also, this is able to make gold, which I can pull out of there now. And I'm just going to delete that because I don't need that anymore. And the one next to it is set to make me the seared bricks with grout. It's set to make me Invar with Invar blend, which my system can craft. It's also set to make me Electrum ingots using Electrum blend, which I also can create. It's also able to make me toast with bread. Again, that all can be created. The pulverizer is set to be able to make the pulverized iron, the pulverized ferrous metal, and to create nether quartz dust, which is something that you use a lot in AE, as well as it's able to make wood chips out of oak, and that's used for making paper for a few of the MFR stuff that you need. And then this is able to get me balls of glue with rubber wood. There's a percentage of getting balls of glue, I think it's 50%, whenever you stick a piece of rubber wood into the sawmill, so in case you need that for anything sticky, like a sticky piston, that's just one thing you can take a look at. As well, I've added a trash can here to this system, and I've also slightly modified a few things. Specifically, I'm inputting the sand into my AE system, and it actually stores it on a lower level. I've also added a third section to my processing just to try and speed things up. I'm probably going to modify this again at some point, just kind of shrink it down a bit. I have an idea for making a little bit smaller, specifically using either AE or another combination of thermal expansion conduits, but we'll see. And we've got the hardened glass processor up here, as well as the pulverized obsidian and the ability to make, I believe it was, basically it's able to make, it knows how to make pulverized things. So at any rate, let's go down to the next level here if I can without killing my computer. As soon as I pause the game, it jumps. I'm not even joking. It goes to about 30 square, and then it jumps considerably higher than that usually. I want to go down. Okay, so this is a fairly important floor. This is where most of my original processing was going on. Now this, I do this all the time. Okay, let's try that again. This is my soul sand. 256 stacks of soul sand, which is enough to complete the quest. I just haven't handed them in yet. As well as the barrel that connects over to here. Now this makes the clay, I don't believe I've talked about this before. It works along the same premise as the soul sand, which I've already explained. It basically just places water and then clicks the dust into the water, creates clay blocks, moves them over, breaks it down into clay balls, and stores it in this barrel. And this system will run until it finishes, and yeah, that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot to it, thankfully. But at any rate, over here, I have a few systems that are able to make me processors. Of course, you can always put those in one single thing, but I decided to do them separately just because I constantly find myself trying to make multiple things at once, and it speeds things up if they're not all trying to use the same machine. And then up here, I believe, is my dirt storage, just so I've got a place for it. Over here, we've got the magma crucible, which is able to make redstone, or destabilized redstone for my conduits, which I will eventually be upgrading at some point. Fluid transposer As you can see, it just dumps, if I could get the right one, it just dumps the redstone blocks in there. So this one hasn't changed a whole lot. This floor hasn't changed at all, minus a couple pipes running down through it. This floor is a floor you guys have not seen yet, so I will have to explain this in a little bit of detail here. First and foremost, I'll just kind of work my way down the rows. This row of furnaces was initially being used to smelt the copper ore dusts and all the other ore dusts that you get from pulverizing things and breaking them with hammers, etc. That's basically what that row is for. I've modified that to not be used anymore in favor of that, which I'll explain in a minute. But over here on the right hand side, and I'm going to skip to this one first, we have, let's see if I can actually get my mouse on one of these. There it is. So we put the aluminum ore gravel, and all the way down this line, it creates all of the different ore gravels and places them and breaks them with hammers. Now the reason I have it doing this is every time you break the ore gravel, not just the ore piece, but when you combine them into another gravel, when you break it with a hammer, you actually get a possibility of getting more than 4 pieces. So you can get 4 to 6. That's 1 to about 1.5 pieces every time. So you're actually making a small profit, very, very small, marginally beneficial, but over time it can add up, at least from what I've found. So it's worth doing this, and it doesn't cost any. It doesn't really cost any power outside of the AE network, which really doesn't cost a whole lot at all. And then I do the same thing after the gravel with the sand. I believe it's the sand version. Oop. Again, pardon my frame rates. I know it's really stuttery and it's going to turn out really terrible for YouTube, but unfortunately this world just kind of works that way with everything the way it is. I might turn some of the stuff off later, and that should help. As you can see, it uses the ore sands, and then we take the ore dusts and we smelt them down. Now, in order to get those, you can do it using the AE system. I'm not going to get into that. There is one way of doing it, but it does tend to bog things down. So what you can do instead is export the things that you want into liquid crafters. So you can export the broken aluminum ore, which will give you the gravel, as you can see, and it pumps it in here, and every time it gets 4, it will automatically make it. Same with the sand. Oh, it's the dust. The sand's on the other side, and this works all the way down the same way. Import, export, exactly the same process. Now down at the end here, and actually this is something I should mention as well, as you can kind of tell, these are actually flashing. It's a little bit difficult to see, but this cable in the middle, the red net cable, is flashing. The reason that we have the red net cable there is the liquid crafters require a redstone pulse in order to craft anything. So if you don't have a pulse, they just keep their inventory, end of story. The programmable RedNet controller is what I'm using to create my redstone pulse. You can use the redstone clock. It's a little bit cheaper, but I prefer this method just because it's a little bit more high tech, and I find that I have a little bit more control over it. It's just my personal preference, but obviously it's up to you. I just have it set to IOR, which just means the right side. The white really doesn't matter. You can change that, but at the moment it doesn't affect too much. You set the main program here to wave square timer. It just tells you that that is the timer that you'd be looking for. You set the constant. I've got it set to 10. I believe it functions on a basis of ticks. So if you set it to 20, I think it actually only goes off once every second, which is why I've got it set to 10. So I'm going to turn it up to 20 just because it doesn't go off all that often. At least from what I find, it really doesn't max any of these out all too frequently at any rate. And finally, over here, we have another system. This is actually just to get me dirt. This actually just uses rotten flesh, pumps them into a chest, which then outputs under the bottom of these autonomous activators, puts the rotten flesh in, and then it just places it, breaks it, drops it, and then goes right back into the AE system. This is just to get myself more dirt, just because I found that I needed some, and I got really tired of standing around waiting. Now for kind of the piece to resistance, if you've watched Direwolf 20, you will be familiar with this whole setup, the majority of the setup anyways. Basically, it's four Tinker's Construct, what are they called, smelteries. And the way this works, I have my AE system set to output certain ore dusts into the smelteries. Now, it is my understanding that the ore dust version of any ore is actually able to be doubled, but only in a smeltery. I haven't actually confirmed this. I know this used to be the case. I believe it still is. But at any rate, this is a semi-cheaper way for me to do things as opposed to doing it with the furnaces. It's also a lot more efficient because it can smelt more at once. As well, I've also got a fluid export bus on the seared window, or it can be a tank, doesn't matter, to fill it with lava. Now you do have to be careful with the different materials you put in. If you put anything that can mix, it will mix and you will end up having yourself a very bad time. So do be careful. Make sure all your materials don't mix unless of course you want them to, and make sure that you set that up as a crafting recipe with an interface instead of just pumping in. Otherwise you'll end up with an infinite amount of a mixed material such as electrum and no gold or silver, and obviously that's not what you want. Over here, I believe I've got the tin, silver, and shiny, or platinum. Over here, just to go over the little combinations I'm using, is gold and I believe aluminum. Is it aluminum? It is aluminum. So gold and aluminum. And then over here is iron and copper. And then the last two over here, which I've forgotten, are nickel or ferrous and lead. And that prevents any sort of overlapping. You could probably squeeze this in a little bit differently if you did this with 4, or if you did this with 3, you could probably squeeze it in a little bit differently there if you did 3 in each and you were just very careful. But I just find that 4 worked out fairly well for me, and it doesn't really take up that much more lava. So that pretty much sums up everything I wanted to show you guys down here, and I believe I've gone over all of the important systems that I've added. What I do want to take a quick look at is the hoarding section of the quests. As you can see, we do have a few different things. I just want to go briefly over these and kind of discuss what my plan is for them, just to give you guys an idea of what I'm thinking of doing for these, since for the most part it's not really a big issue to get through them. Punch trees, get blisters. Probably just going to go with an MFR farm set up to spaced out properly to grow these. Not a difficult prospect at all. You just set it up similar to the way you would normally set up like a wheat farm or something, and then just space certain platforms so they don't plant everywhere. Save yourself some saplings. You could make it plant them everywhere, but realistically that's a little bit much. You don't need them growing everywhere, but with oak it is possible for that to happen. They do grow side by side, so it's not as big of an issue, but it all depends on how you prefer to look at it. As well, you've also got the Sands of Time, which I'm in the process of working on. It's fairly slow. I could probably do this fairly soon, but not too worried about it. That's just similar to the ore processing facility I have. Not the end. There are a few different ways of doing this. You can actually set this up to use liquefied ender into one of these casting basins that already has a piece of obsidian, but obviously that's fairly expensive. I recommend using the ex nihilo method, which I don't recall off the top of my head. I just know that it's considerably cheaper than that. As well, we also have the blacksmith blocks, which requires a seared stone. And I tried looking up the recipes of these before. And let me just switch this, because I keep having to switch it to cheat mode every so often whenever I accidentally break things. Okay, seared stone. So the recipe for seared stone is just seared stone in there. And if we go in here, it appears to be any sort of stone item. If you can get yourself stone, compressed cobblestone, anything like that, it will turn it into seared stone, and then you can make yourself that. So that's really not all that difficult, and that's pretty much the only way to get it to my knowledge. We then have iceberg, which you can do with the glacial accumulator. It's a little bit time consuming and requires an infinite water source, but it's certainly not a difficult one by any stretch of the imagination. The dirt collection, this is going to require considerably more dirt than I have, But again, it's not that difficult. You just have to get enough plant material, or rather enough organic material to collect everything. Then you have the Neptune's Cloud Fantasy. You only have to collect 100 pieces of cloud, which if you have your view distance fairly short, you won't be able to see them, as I can't. If I view it right, sometimes I can see them in the waypoint, but they are fairly high up there. All you need is a jetpack. You can fly up, and I believe the clouds work the same way as sulfur does. If you fly up above them and drop in, you will stand on top of the second block. So you'll kind of stand in it as if it's water, but the block below you, you'll still be able to stand on. Just be careful when you move around because you can fall through it. Alright, so let's take a look at the last few here. The near infinite power, this is one that I'll probably work on over time. It's basically you just need power. I know you can do stuff with bigger reactors. I might look into doing something like that just to make it a little bit faster process. And then there's crystal clear glass, which requires 10,000 glass and 10,000 clear glass. You can just put sand into a smeltery for clear glass and just cook sand for normal glass. Really not that difficult. Slimy, this is just growing the green and blue slimy trees, or yeah, pretty much that's about it. I think there's either one or two types of trees. I think it's just the one. No, it's just the one, and you can get slime balls from the actual tree itself. Then you have the Cobblegen Madness. Obviously, this is for the stupid amount of cobble, the 43 million, or however much it was. Then there's massive storage, which just requires a deep storage unit. We've already done that. Then we've got Soul Sand, which, like I said, I've got 16,000 of it. I can complete this at any time. It's just a matter of me being too lazy to do so. And then the purple, which I'm not quite sure how I'm going to deal with this yet. You do have to have access to a lot of blue and a lot of red. And I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do for that yet, but I will figure something out at some point, and I'll let you guys know when I do. But anyway, those are all of the hoarding quests. What I'm going to do for the rest of this episode is I'm actually going to try and get started on some of the steel-powered flight quests. The Hell's Kitchen quests, in my opinion, really aren't difficult. They're just slow, boring, and not very interesting. You're growing a lot of different types of food, which is certainly useful, but once you get toast, unless you really want to branch out a little bit, you don't really need to, do anything more with food. I'll probably do these just to do them, but I'm probably not going to focus them on camera just because they're not really all that important in my opinion, like I said. So I will be back. I'm going to go prepare for the steel-powered flight, and we'll take a look and see what's going on at that point. Alright guys, so I did kind of lie a little bit. I know I spent most of this episode just kind of going around showing you guys everything you've sort of already seen and explaining what I've added on. I'm going to make this mostly an update video just because it honestly really is. Most of what I've shown you here is just updated information on what the world looks like currently and before we move on. I know the last step video was the same way, and I do apologize for kind of just mostly having update videos. It's just I really haven't had time to record and sit down and actually focus on doing some of these different quest lines here. I've been trying to collect a certain degree of materials. I've got a few thousand iron ingots, for example, but in terms of actually completing the quests, I haven't quite gotten that far yet. So with that, I do have one last thing to show you before I sign off here. Just for the starting of the steelworking, and if I remember correctly, all you have to do is get yourself the steelworking and you book. So we need to get ourselves a book, and it just explains how to do this. It says pour molten seared stone over the materials in me book and a casting table to make the steelwork guidebook. Right? Not very difficult. And as you can see, same as in the recipe, it's a book in the casting table with some seared stone, and that will get us the book. Or you can do it with a normal book. Apparently that works as well. So I'm not going to do that on camera right now. I'll probably do that in between this episode and next, and I will see you guys next time. The next chance we get, we'll be going through some of the steelworking things. Thank you guys for watching. Of course, if you do have any questions about anything you've seen on here, any of the systems or mods, certainly feel free to ask me. I feel that I'm fairly knowledgeable, so, just just let me know. And if you see something that you think I've done wrong, or if you have any suggestions for systems that I've made that, may not be entirely optimal, certainly I know that some of the things I do aren't optimal size-wise or aren't optimal system-wise, but for the most part I do things the way I do things, and it's not necessarily going to change, but certainly feel free to make any suggestions you think might help out, and I will certainly take them into consideration. And again, thank you guys for watching. I've been Diego, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.